From Square Two, this is What's Wrong with Revenue. I'm Mike Lieberman, CEO at Square Two, and along with my longtime friend and business partner, Eric Kalis, this show answers the question many CEOs, CMOs, CROs, and business owners are asking, what's wrong with revenue? New shows drop every Thursday morning. You can find the video version of the show on YouTube at the Square Two Marketing channel, on our website at the What's Wrong with Revenue page located in the footer, or on our free streaming service Square Two Plus, both located at square2marketing.com. You can subscribe to the show or subscribe to Square Two Plus, and we'll email you new show content as soon as it's published. You can also submit questions to the show on the What's Wrong with Revenue page of our website. Eric and I answer questions every single episode. You can also find the podcast version of the show on all your favorite podcast platforms. Enjoy the show. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Season 2, Episode 18 of What's Wrong with Revenue. I'm Mike Lieberman, and today we have a special guest with us, EOS Implementer Monica Justice. And our show today is an interview with an EOS implementer. We're going to talk a lot about how RGS and EOS work together. You know, EOS is the Entrepreneurial Operating System. It's used by over 150,000 businesses worldwide. And it's very quickly becoming the go-to system for companies that want to increase traction and scale their companies. But EOS has a relatively light touch from a revenue generation perspective. And what we want to talk about today is how RGS and EOS work really well together to help companies scale and grow revenue specifically. So like I said, very happy to have EOS Implementer Monica Justice with us today. We're going to ask Monica all kinds of questions about EOS and how she works with her clients. And we'll talk about how RGS and EOS work really well together. Monica, great having you on the show. Thanks for joining us. And I would be remiss to not show you guys also, Eric is here as usual. Eric, longtime friend and business partner at Square Two. So what I want to cover today, guys, is a couple of things. I want to help the audience learn a little bit more about EOS. So we'll ask you to talk to us a little bit about EOS and how companies use it. I also want to talk about how revenue is a component of what EOS helps your clients with, how EOS and RGS work together, and then what kinds of companies are a good fit for EOS, who do you typically work with, and how do you work with them, and similar question about RGS, and then also maybe you could share some experiences you've had working with companies on EOS and maybe how the revenue piece of it comes together. How does that sound?
Sounds great.
Okay, awesome. So why don't we start at the beginning, and maybe you could help our audience with a little bit of background, like what is EOS and how should they be thinking about that?
Yeah, so EOS, it stands for the Entrepreneurial Operating System. And what it is just a way of sort of harmonizing and orchestrating all the moving parts and pieces of your business. I like to think about it as a way of managing human energy in an organization versus a computer operating system. This is sort of like a human operating system, specifically meant for leadership teams to help them really get aligned on the vision for their organization, make sure they're all seeing the same thing, and then tools to start executing on the vision with more focus, a little more discipline, driving more accountability. And then ultimately that leadership team becomes healthier, working better, smarter together. They're a healthy and smart leadership team.
That sounds good. How long have you been doing this?
So about 4.5 years now.
And what were you doing before that?
So my career was more on the corporate side, but I took a path where I was with one organization for a total of about 20 years, kind of grew up in that organization, started in broadcast operations, live television, lots of complexity in a live television environment. Continued to grow and advance in that organization, ultimately leading all of creative and production operations. And then after about 17 years at that company, got recruited, went to a startup. So the company I had been with grew to be an $8 billion global organization. So really managed kind of growth and complexity that comes along with that. Left for about 4 years, went to a startup and really grew that business to about a $300 million business. And I was in an operations function there where we got to profitability, which was really critical. But it was in that role that I realized I had this knack and passion for working with leadership teams and helping to drive decision-making and putting operational processes in place so that we could get more done. Long story short, I ended up getting recruited back to the company I had left, and I worked with the executive leadership team and really put a business operating system in place for what now is a global organization. Had the opportunity to leave in 2018 and finally start my own thing. I'd been with 2 organizations my whole career and loved doing the operating system and wanted to find a way to do that with other organizations, ideally different industries. So after trying to create my own thing, I came across Traction, which is a great book by Gino Wickman. And I realized that Gino really had created the playbook, so to speak, for what it was I was trying to do. And I decided to become an EOS implementer in 2019, and I've been doing that ever since, and just love working with clients across all different industries. It's been great.
That's great. So you obviously have seen a lot of companies that maybe were struggling when they came to you. What are some of the typical issues or challenges you see companies dealing with when they start talking to you about alternative solutions like EOS?
So, usually there's some level of frustration. They've been growing, maybe they had a really nice growth path, and then they just get stuck. And usually they're getting stuck with people, right? Sometimes there's people issues. They've brought on a lot of people, and they got into a business and they never expected to have to lead and manage people. They just didn't think about it. So managing people, realizing that nobody seems to want and love this business as much as they do. That's one of the challenges. Sometimes it is that their business is growing so fast, they just don't feel like they don't have a handle on it. And they have decision fatigue, and kind of don't know what decisions to make, and don't feel like they have the resources to make those decisions. Sometimes it's profitability, right? I have a great business. I love my business. It's just not as profitable as I want it to be. So those are a few of the things that I see. And I would say the people and the complexity. My business has grown to a level of complexity. I'm not sure how to get it through to the other side. Mm-hmm.
So you think those are like the major issues, the people issues, the complexity issues, the stuck issues? That's probably a lot of what draws people to the
stuck in some way, right? Profitability, can't drive the revenue that I'm looking for, can't quite get the people in place to do what it is I'm looking to do.
Those are the symptoms though, right, Monica? Like the root cause is nobody starts their business because they're really good at organizational leadership, right? It happens organically. The accountant starts an accounting firm, the engineer starts an engineering firm. Have you ever had someone come to you and say, I'd like to start a business, but I want to start with a operating system that I could use?
No.
Right. And that's, I think, one of the biggest challenges, because entrepreneurs just don't think that way.
Yeah. Maybe you could go into a couple of the different elements of EOS. Like I know VTO is a thing. So maybe you could talk to our audience a little bit about what some of the highlights or the tools are of EOS.
So when Gino created EOS, it kind of stemmed from this discovery that, all leadership teams struggle with thousands of issues. And he developed this model, and the model really helps us understand that when we strengthen 6 key areas of our business, we're able to get more of the stuff done that we want to get done, take our business to where we want it to go. And with each of these key areas of the business, there's tools to support growth in each of those key areas. So as you mentioned, one of the areas is the vision component. We call it a key component, and the vision component is one of those key components. And the way we help leadership teams get stronger in that vision component is through a tool we call the VTO, and that stands for Vision Traction Organizer. And all it is a very simplified approach to strategic planning, if you want to think about it that way. It's a 2-page document. I always say when I'm meeting with leadership teams that if you don't implement EOS, I always will advocate for that. I think there's a lot of value in it. That Vision Traction Organizer is a great organizing tool to kind of get your whole team on the same page with the answers to 8 simple questions. We help you discover your core values, get you all aligned on what behaviors, what are the attributes that you value in people in your organization. Your core focus, what is it that you love to do and you're best at, your 10-year target. And, we always say the target can be anywhere from 5 to 30 years out, but some long range, big, energizing, big goal that everybody can get behind, row in the same direction. Marketing strategy, right? Not quite in depth as far as what you guys do, right? But the high level, getting the leadership team all on the same page with who you should be talking to, who's your best ideal prospect, and what you should be saying. And that's the 3 uniques. That's what we call it in EOS. And then do you have a proven process or a guarantee for how you take care of your customers? So that marketing strategy, really critical. And I think it goes underrepresented. A lot of times I see leadership teams will delegate that out to the marketing department. But when you don't have a whole leadership team aligned on who you should be talking to and what you should be saying, you're probably not getting the most out of your energy there. And then a 3-year picture. 3-year picture is just helps everybody see where you're going long term, brings that 10-year target into a little more focus. And then the second page of the VTO is what we call the traction side. And think of that as the plans to execute the vision. A 1-year plan, your rocks, and then we always have an issues list. We almost can think of that like a parking lot for the big things that you want to get done, the bigger issues and challenges you have to deal with.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And look, Square 2 runs EOS, and we've had a long kind of somewhat up and down experience with these kind of operating systems for our company. We ran what's it called now? Gazelles, scaling up for a while, and we had an implementer. We did it ourselves. We kind of looked at EOS lots of times, and through our most recent EOS experience, we saw, like you said, the revenue piece of EOS is a little light, right? And it makes sense because you're covering all kinds of high level,
Well, it's just as heavy as the people HR
Sure.
part or the manufacturing operating systems or processes that we're capturing.
Right.
But you're right, it's not emphasized. And if you want to grow your business, we need some revenue.
Right. And we also realize that while most companies have kind of naturally built systems for hiring and firing and paying the bills and purchasing things, they don't have similar systems where it comes to revenue generation and how sales and marketing and customer service are all working together. So it made sense for us anyway to start looking at what a revenue generation system might look like in context of EOS and how it goes much deeper around some of the things you're starting to get them to think about. And RGS does a better job helping them execute that on a regular basis. Maybe you could talk a little bit about how it fits into the EOS framework.
Yeah. So Monica, one of the processes that EOS uses is the L10 or the level 10 meeting, where the leadership team gets together every single week, exactly at the same time, exactly with the same agenda, exactly with the same attendees. And they're working through a prescribed process to get those issues solved on a weekly basis. So can you talk a little bit about how then leadership teams then cascade that down to their teams?
Yeah. So, that's what you're referring to is the traction component, and the way we get strong in the traction component is through quarterly rocks and a great meeting pulse. So a meeting pulse, when we talk about it, there's annual planning, there's quarterly planning, and then we supplement that pulse with a weekly level 10 meeting. So as you guys know, we teach that first to the leadership team. We really want the leadership team to be doing a level 10 meeting every single week, 90 minutes, start on time, end on time, same agenda. And when the leadership team has a solid level 10 meeting, you're not 100% strong until you've cascaded that all the way down to the organization. So the way that would look is each of the major functions, sales and marketing, operations, admin, finance, whatever the organization might call it, those major functions would then start to cascade a level 10 meeting with their team. So they're meeting as a leadership team, and then they may be going and having the level 10 with their direct reports. And then depending on the size of the organization, that continues to cascade. And the point here is that we want everybody in the organization to be involved in some kind of meeting on a weekly basis. It doesn't have to be 90 minutes for every team, but some kind of meeting where we're coming together. We call it keeping our circles connected so that we can go back into the business strong, executing really well. And one of the other tools we bring into that level 10, as you guys know, is this idea of issue solving. And that's a big part of these level 10s. And we actually dedicate most of the meeting agenda to solving issues together. And now what we're doing is a culture where we can have a place where we can get issues on a list somewhere. And then as leaders, we're teaching our teams how to prioritize and solve those issues.
So let's say the manufacturing department is having their level 10 meeting each week, and they solve 2 issues that week and every week. You're saying that that would be 104 obstacles out of the way to them being more successful each year. Is that what you're saying?
So. Yeah.
That sounds pretty enticing to most business owners listening today.
Yeah.
Also, we're using level 10 kind of cavalier. Can you explain what level 10 means?
Sure. So we call it the level 10 meeting because when we first start meeting with leadership teams like you guys, we always ask, rate your meetings today on a scale of 1 to 10. And, based on the type of clients that I described earlier, many of them say, what meetings, right? Or 4, right? So what we're trying to do is get that 4 to a 10 on a regular basis. And the last thing leadership teams do, all teams do it when they finish a meeting, is they rate the meeting 1 to 10. And if we're ever below an 8, I always encourage the teams to say, what could we have done to get it to a 10? So it's always just that desire to make sure that that time is valuable for everybody walking out of the room.
Excellent. So when you're talking about the sales and marketing teams of your clients, how many of them are engaged in a weekly L10 meeting?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I would like to say all of them, Eric. And I think the reality is it's easier said than done, right? And sometimes mobilizing to be able to get a team in place is challenging. And a lot of times, we haven't talked about the demographic of the true demographic of an EOS client, but sometimes they're between 10 and 250 people, plus or minus, right? Generally 10 to 250 people, plus or minus. But when you're on that smaller side, sometimes you don't have a team, right? The person at the leadership team, in the leadership team is the sales and marketing person. But as that team builds out and they have a couple direct reports, ideally they're meeting on a weekly basis. But I would say more often than not, given the size of the teams and the dynamics of the teams, most of them aren't really at that point yet, but they all aspire to get there. And as soon as they add members to that team, they should be getting that level 10 going.
Yeah, I mean, we identified the same thing, is that a lot of companies aren't having that dedication to a weekly rhythm around sales and marketing and customer service, because all 3 of those areas are directly responsible for growing revenue. So the weekly revenue team meeting, as we call it, is really just the sales and marketing L10 meeting in EOS parlance. But we try to go a lot deeper because, like you said, one of the key factors of an EOS prospect of yours is that they're frustrated. And typically the frustration comes with, I hit a ceiling and I can't get to that next revenue plateau. We aim to solve that with RGS. We're the 6 pieces of the pie for EOS. RGS has also 6 pieces. And one of those things is the strategy. Can you talk a little bit about how deep the typical EOS client will go on differentiation and having a big story that'll wake up their industry and start to disrupt things? Give us a little bit about how deep you go in that with EOS.
So, as I mentioned in the VTO, that's really the primary place where we work on the marketing strategy together. And it's really a simplified approach to a marketing strategy. And it's powerful for the leadership team. And the way we facilitate this is first trying to understand, get everybody on the same page with who the ideal prospect is. And many times in organizations, that's an exercise because we realize we serve lots of customers. So this is an exercise in saying, okay, yeah, you may serve lots of customers, but who's your best customer, right? What does that, if I lined up your best customers in a room, what would they look like? Demographic, geographic, and sort of the psychographic makeup. So we try to get to a statement describing that ideal prospect. And then we define the 3 uniques. So that's language we use. You can think of them like the value proposition, the 3 differentiators, kind of get the team really thinking about why that ideal prospect chooses you. And usually, sometimes it's straightforward. Usually it's a process and there's a lot of words up on a board, and we kind of have to drill down and choose, but it's, really just narrowing it down to the three.
Look, we appreciate it because many people don't even take the time to have that conversation as a team. So even using a lighter touch that we would consider lighter, because we obviously dive into revenue generation, it's appreciated because at least they can now know where they're aiming their cannon, as opposed to before where they were shotgunning it all over the place. So when they say things like, oh, our three uniques are, we have the best people, how do you feel about that?
If there's something, if that is a true differentiator for them, right? Because it's the three uniques are the combination of the three things are really what make you unique. And you might share two of those uniques with your competitor, but it's the combination of the three that make you unique. I sort of reserve judgment, I guess I could say, Eric, on best people, because best people to my clients might be really meaningful to them.
We get that a lot also. We push back a little bit. We're like, well, what do you mean by we have the best people? Because if they are the most industry seasoned, or they have the most patents for their engineering, those are the things that we should bring out, not just we have the best people.
Right.
When we look at the three uniques, we look at them in terms of, we call them remarkables. And there's two basic criteria. Interesting enough that someone would tell their buddy about it, and unique to their company. And that's where we really try to encourage RGS clients to go a little deeper on those three uniques, to really develop something that people will talk about and spread in the industry. People in your industry talk about you, get referrals, and they don't cost a dime. They're the best way we can get new leads.
So after that's done, right? So they have kind of an idea of who they want to attract, and they have some interesting things to say about it. How is an EOS client then directed to take that to the next level? Like, is that just kind of like put back on their lap and be like, okay, good luck, or like how does that work?
I think another way of putting it is like, once you work with them strategically, how do they put it into play?
Well, specifically around the marketing, piece of it.
So it really varies. And obviously a more mature organization may have a sales and marketing team where they go out and they can actually, work with it creatively, right? Build it out and package it. Most teams will think about it over multiple quarters to say, is this a priority for this quarter? And you guys know, a lot of it depends on if we're getting a ton of demand and we don't really need to market because we're getting a lot of referrals, it's not as big an issue for them. But if they're over time, one of the other things we look at is people. So going back to your comment, Eric, about, we have the best people. Think about all of this in context, right? Because we're creating this VTO after we have built their accountability chart, after we have talked about the strength of each of their teams, meaning the strength of the function, right people, right seat. Do we have all the right people in the right seats? So now they have this marketing strategy. And if there's a gap between how they're trying to position themselves and the strength of that team, they're going to begin to prioritize that at the time that's right for them, right? So
their quarterly objective might be, let's get an agency here, or let's bring in some contractors to fill these gaps, and that would become a quarterly goal.
Yeah, and that's what I typically see is, it might be a quarter or two or three after I start working with them, but eventually it goes onto their issues list. It might not be the biggest priority this quarter, but maybe 2 quarters from now, they say, okay, now's the quarter that we've got to package this stuff. We got to think about how we're going to the market, what we're saying, how we're positioning ourselves. So they do it at the time that's right for them, because as I mentioned earlier, they've got issues, right? So working through those issues and prioritizing them based on the other things they have going on in their business. Each client has to do what's right for them.
One of the things that I think is remarkable at EOS is the system, and look, I only have one implementer experience with you, but you seem very good, and the system seems very good at kind of managing the idea that a lot of businesses have fires that need to be put out. Everything seems very organized and planned out, and nothing ever seems to be on fire, right? But you must have companies that come to you who run their business by putting out fire drills, right? How do you get them to think about like quarter over quarter impacting like marketing and sales when like they need more leads immediately? Like, how do you get them to change their thinking about that? Because it does take time sometimes. We deal with this a lot with clients. Like, well, I know you want to grow, and I know you need leads, and I know you need revenue, but you don't have a strategy, and it's going to take us a couple months to kind of figure this out and then put the foundational pieces in place. And I think we do a pretty good job at helping them understand that. But this system seems to do an exceptional job at helping them kind of piece it out or in an organized way over time. How do you manage to do that?
So really important thing for me to do is describe my role for you. Okay. And this is really important because I am not the person that's coming in and giving them strategy. I am a teacher, a facilitator, and a coach. So in EOS, I'm teaching them tools to help them come to the conclusions that are right for them. So teaching them these tools, the vision traction organizer, the accountability chart, the level 10 meeting, lots of tools, and facilitator in that once they're in the room, getting them to have the discussion and create the awareness that they need to make the decision that they need to make. And then guide them to that, to say, okay, here's what I think I hear you saying. This gap, your sales team has hit a ceiling. That's the language we use in EOS. And they're not getting the results. And maybe it's the sales team, maybe it's marketing, but there's some discovery that you need to hear or that you need to take action on. That's what I'm hearing. So I'm facilitating them. And then coach is the last role that I have. And that's where I might come back to them 2 quarters later and say, okay, guys, this is still an issue. What are you going to do about it? It seems like something that is holding you back. Is this the time, right? So what are you going to do about it? So coach more from the standpoint of, I heard what you said you wanted to do and how you wanted to be different, but I'm not sure if your actions are actually getting you there. So important for me to make that distinction because I'm not giving them the strategy. And often what I'll do is connect them with people like you, right? Who, if they're stuck on what to do with marketing and strategy, hopefully I've got great people in my back pocket like you. And if you're a fit for them, then I'm going to make those connections or encourage them to make connections within their industry or their peer group so that they get the resources that they need to be able to move it forward. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. That's a good answer. And do you also kind of look at what they're talking about accomplishing and saying to them, like, this seems like a lot in a short amount of time? I think maybe you could deal with it differently, because sometimes people do have kind of caviar dreams and tuna fish budgets for certain things, especially in this particular area, and or maybe just big eyes in general. Like, we're going to do all this next quarter. Like, do you ever help them organize that thinking also?
Yeah. So every quarter, and you guys know this, you've probably heard me say it a bunch of times, but part of what we do with EOS, we're trying to make you better predictors, right? So as leadership teams, making you better predictors in your business. So every quarter you're setting rocks at the company level and individual. Rocks are just quarterly priorities, by the way, for anybody who doesn't know, just quarterly priorities, 90-day priorities. And what happens, Mike, is typically they discover on their own. So every quarter we look at how we did last quarter. What was your revenue prediction? What was your profitability prediction? Did you have key measurables? How many rocks did you set? Did you get them done? Ideally, we're getting 100% of your rocks done every quarter. If we get 80% done, we're celebrating that too, because that's pretty awesome.
Not at Square Two. We must get everything done.
100%.
Right,
I love that.
to be fair, the typical entrepreneurial company doesn't get much done, or some things, or intermittently, or random. And this way, 80% every single quarter would be something to celebrate, right?
It would be. And just to get back to your question is, that's when they discover for themselves. We set this, typically what I hear.
Too much on our
set
plate.
too many rocks.
Right.
We were overly ambitious.
Right.
We packed 5 things into that one rock. So it's really that awareness and discovery. And that's part of what makes EOS so powerful. It's not somebody coming down with a hammer and telling you what you need to do. It's that discovery as a team and the realization that we need to do something different. And then as teams get healthier and healthier, they're setting fewer, more powerful rocks. They're getting them done, and they're starting to see the progress in their business. So that's why usually after a year of working with a client, it is the light bulbs start going off, because they reflect on the last 12 months and they say, wow, in the moment, I didn't realize we were getting so much done. And when I reflect on it now, I see how much we've achieved and how much better we are this year than we were last year.
We always talk about the to-do list, which are small activities that will be 1 week or less to accomplish. Yeah. And if everybody does 2 to-dos each week, times 5 people on a leadership team, times 52 weeks, holy smokes, did we move the ball forward? But you don't realize it's happening while it's going on.
That's right.
So let's shift gears a little bit. So you know a little bit about RGS and what we're trying to do at Square Two. You have a lot of experience with EOS. You have a lot of EOS clients. talk to our audience a little bit about what you think is the value of having a revenue generation system like RGS fit into what you're doing with EOS clients.
Yeah. So, I think what has occurred to me with RGS and where I think it fits in nicely is for those clients that are growing and haven't fully built out. So maybe they have some marketing folks. So maybe they have a sales and marketing person and maybe marketing coordinator, a couple people, but they want to take it to the next level. So they don't have the resources, and maybe they're hiring maybe slightly more junior people, right? Because of budget or whatever reason. And they need somebody to come in and augment. And sometimes it's a validation. So I think of RGS as a nice, perhaps a validation of, hey, this strategy is a good strategy, but this is just how you can execute it. And here's how we can measure it and get a little more surgical about it. Sometimes they don't know, right? They've been trying a whole bunch of things for some period of time.
Random acts of marketing.
Yeah, right. And they need somebody to come in and just give them some new perspective. So I love it from the standpoint of teams growing, but not yet at that point where they can make the full investment of a marketing function, but need some support and maybe can't afford the whole, big marketing engagement that can be really, really costly. So there's sort of this gap between, tiny marketing agency support that might not have a lot of experience and really, really big marketing agency. So I think RGS, I see it as kind of that sweet spot in the middle for some of our EOS clients in that, 10 to 250 people range to have access to great talent, great experience, to help them understand what levers to pull, start pulling them, and then learn, because you guys know, and we know, marketing takes time, right? It's not like you can turn a switch and then you figure it out overnight. So what levers to pull them in a really smart way so that you can maximize the investment that you're making. So that's where I see RGS kind of filling a sweet spot that maybe is missing in the
marketplace. That's exactly what we say.
Yeah. Well, I also like your reference to teach a person to fish, right? Like show them what best practices are. Just like EOS, you're not giving them the answer, but you're showing them the practice, you're giving them the tools. Once again, nobody starts their business because they're good at sales and marketing. They started their business for another reason. So by having this systematic approach to their revenue generation, now they have that toolkit that someday they can graduate and their team can run on their own independently.
Yeah.
We haven't talked about this at all. And I think it's something that Square 2 is very tuned into, and EOS is also. And one of our challenges going through EOS is this scorecard element of EOS specifically. And we've actually been talking about RGS potentially like bringing the scorecard to the system and giving them like a scorecard starter pack, because it's so hard to figure out what to track and how to track it and over what period of time. So,
and don't forget the leading versus lagging conversation, which indicators are key and not.
Right. So when you work with a client on the EOS scorecard, how do you get them to start thinking about what they should be tracking and how frequently, and how often does that maybe run into some challenges for new EOS clients?
Yeah, very often. And it's not an issue with the tool. It's an issue with how we think about the tool often. So I see two kind of ends of the spectrum. Sometimes I'll have teams that have too many metrics. They're numbers heavy and they have a scorecard that's 3 pages long, and they'll say it's not really working for us because we can't even get through it in 5 minutes in our L10, and we lose people, right? People just don't pay attention to it. And then the other end of the spectrum, which is what numbers should we put on here? So it is finding the right 5 to 12, maybe 15 numbers that are going to give you a pulse on your business. So a lot of times it's mindset and really understanding that we're trying to track the activities, right? I'm all for a few lagging indicators. Lagging indicators are important. We need to know what the results were so that we're all on the same page. Leading indicators help us understand the activities that are happening on a weekly basis, and are they the right activities, or more importantly, are they happening in the right way to be able to get to the result that we're looking for? And I think that's where teams struggle a bit, because they're not quite tuned into the activities that every function are doing, right? So we'll take, sales and marketing as an example. And sometimes I use this because it can sometimes be the easier one to track. If you need to close X number of deals, how many client visits do you need to be having? The activities are the client visits, right? So it's almost an easier one for teams to understand. If I have this many conversations, it's going to convert to this much business. Sometimes it's a little bit harder to understand in an operations function or even a manufacturing function, but it's powerful when we can start to dig into it because it starts to help us see trends and patterns before they become issues. So if we start to see that a leading indicator is off track for 3 or 4 weeks, we can take action on it sooner, really IDS it, identify, discuss, and solve that issue to understand what's at the root of it so we can get it back on track. So that's the power.
Without the scorecard, you wouldn't even know to work on that.
Exactly. Or, 3 quarters from now, you might have a big issue in your business and then you have to do some forensics to figure out what happened.
We often encourage our clients to track website traffic because it's the leading indicator, right? If nobody's coming to your website, that could be a problem.
Yeah.
And then from there, how many people converted into the database? And then how many people became sales opportunities? And then what was our close rate from our sales team? When you have a picture of that, you're right. You can lean into those areas quickly to fix them rather than have them become a major fire 3 quarters from now.
Right, right.
Yeah. So wrapping up a little bit, what do you think the real benefit to a client would be if they had EOS and RGS?
I think they would be getting more of the right stuff done every day, every week, really feeling like their communication is improving and they're equipped to take their business to the next level. And EOS gives them a lot of that. RGS in combination, RGS gives them a better view of who their customer is and what they should be saying to their customer and the activities and actions that are going to help them get the best results. So I do think that combination could be incredibly powerful for a client to really think about how they're getting new customers, how they're developing those customers over time.
Great. And what advice would you give someone who's thinking about EOS? They heard about it and they're not sure it's for them and they're maybe doing a little bit of research. What would you want them to think about?
I would say just schedule a 90-minute meeting. It's a complimentary meeting. It's it really low risk, high reward. I think about it like a free session, right? So it's an hour and a half. You learn all the fundamentals of EOS, and then you decide. And honestly, meet with a couple implementers. I'm a certified implementer. There's lots of other implementers. Find the person who's a fit for you. And self-implementation is an option. Most of the teams that I've worked with who have self-implemented ended up going to an implementer because they value having that objectivity in the room. So
one other thing, Monica, I think we should emphasize is that EOS has a wonderful library of tools, specifically the book. So we've mentioned Traction already.
That's right.
I think Get a Grip, where you actually read a fable about a company who was struggling and then came through the other end using EOS, are great tools to get started on the EOS journey.
You're absolutely right. Yeah. The books and the EOS Worldwide website.
Nice. Great. So why don't you tell our audience how people can get in touch with you if they want to talk to you?
Monica.Justice at EOSworldwide.com. And I'm on LinkedIn. And I think those are probably the 2 best ways to contact me.
Good. Great.
Right.
Thank you so much. Awesome. So wrapping up our episode, and I neglected to do my homework at the beginning of the show, but if you're interested in What's Wrong with Revenue, you can check us out on our YouTube channel. Square 2 has a YouTube channel where all of the What's Wrong with Revenue episodes for season 1 and season 2 are posted there. Go check us out, leave us your likes, and so you can subscribe and leave us comments. We really appreciate it. You can also get access to the show at Square 2, square2marketing.com/Square2PLUS. Square 2 Plus is our free streaming service. We put all of our What's Wrong with Revenue episodes on that every single week, and you can subscribe to Square 2 Plus and we'll notify you when new content is published there. And last but not least, if you're into audio content, check the show out on all of your favorite podcast platforms. You can subscribe to those as well. Thanks everybody for joining us. And in the next episode coming up, we're going to be talking episode 19. We're going to really talk about how our RGS clients use the system to solve their biggest and most challenging revenue-related issues. So join us for episode 19 of season 2 next week. Thanks everybody for joining us. Monica, thanks for being on the show. Really appreciate having you.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
We'll see you all later.
All right.